Welcome back to Ag Unpacked, brought to you by Footprint. Back with us, Wayne Easter, a longtime MP, 28 years, former Solicitor General as Canada's top cop under Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, also a longtime chair of the House of Commons Finance Committee, former dairy farmer, and former president of the National Farmers Union in Canada. And now he is in potato production in Ukraine. Former Solicitor General flying to war-torn Ukraine. Wayne, you have to know that you're on someone's watch list, but that's for another show. Welcome back, Wayne.
Good to be here.
Our special guest today is Jill Verwey. She is president of the Keystone Agricultural Producers, as well as Vice President of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Welcome to the show, Jill.
I'm happy to be here.
Jill, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Currently married, mother, grandmother, part of a family, multi-generational family farm in Portage la Prairie. And we farm about between 8 and 10,000 acres. Grain and oil seeds, as well as we operate a dairy operation where we're milking about 180 cows. And as far as my roles in agriculture, it extends to president of the Keystone Agricultural Producers, where I'm my second year in that term, 2.5 years, as well as being involved in the board there for over 10 plus years. And more recently elected or acclaimed as the first vice president for the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, where we as KAP, General Farm Organization, have a seat there and elected into that position. So have roles provincially as well as taking part in some of those discussions nationally now on behalf of producers right across Canada. So.
All right, thanks for that, Jill. Now, I remember KAP, is a youngish organization. They did have a general farm organization in Manitoba before KAP, but then something happened. I'm not sure what, but then it restarted. Tell us a little bit about your organization in Manitoba.
Sure. So 40 years young, we celebrated our 40th anniversary in 2024, and representing 15,000 plus farmers in Manitoba. And our paid membership is probably, we're actually at a record right now at probably around 6,000 members paid, as well as representing 20 commodity associations that are also members. So on our board, it's represented by the 12 districts, regional districts here in Manitoba, as well as 4 other seats which are elected by the commodity associations that are here in Manitoba. So truly a all-encompassing organization that represents the interests of producers in Manitoba, and whether you're a paid member or not, we're representing your interests, what is happening here in the province, and then relaying that message onto our seat that we hold federally on the CFA board.
So someone said the other day that Doug Ford and Canoe are 2 of the most popular premiers in Canada. How are you getting along with your own government?
We have a really strong relationship, and I think that started with reaching out to all members, prior to the election, which happened a year and a half ago. And that has been built with those strong relationships with the departments within the government, and continued with that collaboration that we have now. I think with the elevation of agriculture, and that is part and parcel of the Premier elevating and including agriculture in discussions and realizing the importance of it. My involvement, first started with the Premier's Business and Job Council, which led to trade and the upcoming CUSMA agreement, followed up by election in the States, which basically I think has elevated or lifted the discussion provincially and nationally. and really put a spotlight in agriculture, the importance of it, and that we have to be at the table to discuss and make sure that our interests are heard.
Wayne, I don't know if you were ever at the provincial level. I know, of course, you were president of the National Farmers Union, but how did it work in PEI? Was there a good relationship with the provincial government? Was it tense sometimes?
Well, as I think both you would know, sometimes it's tense and sometimes it's great. We actually, when I first started in the Farmers Union, I was at what you'd say in the NFU as the provincial level. I was at what we at the time called districts, and the premier at the time was Premier Alec Campbell, and we had major tractor demonstrations in order to try and get our point across. In fact, we closed down the car ferries coming to Prince Edward Island, of which was a little bit interesting because my dad worked as a quartermaster on one of those car ferries, and we still have people. That was 1971. I still have people today grumbling about they couldn't get across on the car ferry during that time. So we were trying to make our point to get our issues across, which were much different than they are today. Supply management was just coming in and so on. But I became great friends with that premier several years later, and actually during that time, because he would come. One thing I really respected about him, he would come and meet with us, and I might say, Jill, that your Premier Canoe, I think he's got amazing respect across the country. He really has. I am very, very impressed with Premier Canoe. Yes, he's working for Manitobans for sure, but he is also working from Canadians. So I think you've got a wonderful premier, and there will be times you disagree, as you know, and there will be times you agree, but that's part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know him very well, but as you say, Wayne, I've seen him in press conferences, and I've always been impressed with his down-to-earth approach. And he just seems like one of the people when he does talk, right? He's not presumptuous, and I think he's a very effective communicator.
He doesn't seem to operate on spin like so many do. He's fairly direct and tries to, I think, be as honest in his answers as he can be, which is not always easy.
You know, talking about tractor rallies, I remember one time I was headed towards Winnipeg to a KAP rally at the legislature, and I was a little late, and I was in a hurry, and I got inside the perimeter of Winnipeg, and there was a couple of tractors in front of me, and I couldn't understand. They refused to pull over, and I was impatient, and they just refused to pull over, and suddenly later on, I realized that these were farmers that were on the way to a rally. They weren't moving from one field to the next. They were on the way to a rally, and I embarrassed myself being impatient about something that I actually promoted if farmers wanted to make a statement, and it can be quite effective. But Jill, tell us, do you believe that as a provincial organization you can help the politics between the provincial government and the federal government? I mean, you're familiar with the fact that it's a 60-40 spending split, and there are a lot of politics between provinces and the Fed sometimes, and Wayne can speak to that a little later as well. But do you think you can help that dynamic?
I think certainly, and I think that the proof is in the pudding, right? Our premier was one of the first ones to say yes. With the proposed changes a while ago with increasing the percentages on the BRM on the agri-stability, and our premier was one of the first ones to step up to agree. But I think that comes with the government's willingness to first listen to stakeholders and primarily KAP. I really think that there is a respect for if the government needs information, that they're reaching out to KAP as a source of that information. You had mentioned, the ebbs and flows, and certainly it's been mentioned about, relationships with government over the term and how does that transcend to the next leader of the next government. And that comes from firm relationships with the departments within agriculture and making sure that we've educated all of the members of our legislature and our MPs on who we are, who we represent, and our interests. And then that transcends into, I hope, policy that will have an evergreen effect, where it's not going to just be there for the government of the day, that it's going to be strong policy decisions that are lifestyle, like that continue, not dependent on which government is in place. It's something that is good for the country, it's good for the province, and it's good for producers to continue what we do.
Well, when you talk about departments, I mean, Wayne's always a good source to go to if you want an opinion on how agricultural departments work, not only federally but across Canada. But Wayne, tell us also a little bit about the politics between provinces and the feds.
Well, there is, under our Constitution, and you talked about the 60-40 split, but you really do have to have them all come together. The feds just can't order it done. So when you are in, and I seen this when I was parliamentary secretary to Andy Mitchell, actually, when he was minister. I traveled across the country, met with all the provincial ministers and their deputies and so on during that time. So when you're in an impending crisis, trying to get agreement with everybody is really, really, really tough. So it's extremely important, I think, for farm organizations like the CFA, but all its provincial counterparts as well, to be able to come together quickly and work simultaneously, if I could call it that, on their provinces, because the feds can't do it alone, although they take a lot of the blame. But if there's a real issue, if the farm organizations, and they all are under different names, but most of them are connected to the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, then they can have the discussions at the provincial level to say, look, Minister, we need agreement on this across the country. And so it's critical to have all those cogs in the wheel, if I could put it that way, working together.
Yeah.
Well, and we used to use the federal minister as leverage to get provinces to step up to the plate. I recall one time we had convinced Minister Van Cleef that he needed to spend a certain amount of money as an ad hoc payment to help farmers. And he said, yep, I'm ready to go ahead, but I can't get the provinces on side. And we encouraged him to just simply announce it and tell provinces, whoever stepped up to the plate, they would get the federal share. And to his credit, he did exactly that, because he knew provinces would be embarrassed if they didn't step up to the plate, and in that case it worked. Jill, the other thing I've always tipped my hat to is how presidents of general farm organizations can effectively represent their province around the CFA table while also reconciling their own needs with the needs of the larger group. I mean, I had it a little easy when it came to that, because when I came to CFA from the Canadian Turkey Marketing Agency. So the only time I was ever on a national board representing a specific province was for a few years when I was on Manitoba Turkey, representing Manitoba Turkey at the CTMA. But after that, I became vice chair there and chairman. And so it was a national picture almost all the time that I was on the national stage. never representing one specific province. And so when I came to CFA, I also represented, of course, the Canada in its entirety, and never had to worry about representing a specific province as well. How do you reconcile that?
Well, I think firstly, when sitting on the board, when we're discussing the interests of our regions, that is really important, so that we make sure that all of the implications are heard and understood. But at the end of the day, as a chair and as a member of CFA, I think it leads to the greater question that a lot of people, I think, maybe tend to forget, is the actual governance of that organization and what your role sitting at the board is. And I think at the end of the day, my role is for, at that table, vice chair of all and representing all interests of all members, Canadian members sitting at CFA, as well as it's even broader than that, because I'm glad you mentioned, the collaboration and connection between provincial ministers and the federal minister. With our upcoming meeting that we're having here in Winnipeg, Manitoba is hosting, is the our summer meeting, which normally would include the meeting of all of the ministers of agriculture, as well as Minister McDonald from Ottawa. So I think at that table, outlining, and I have no problem in, I have strong information and help from our office and communication from CFA to know what's happening here in Manitoba, as well as regionally, because certainly, from a prairie focus, grain focus, at that table, we represent, Western Manitoba, and we certainly, or Western Canada, which maybe have different needs or wants than Eastern Canada. So, at that table, when decisions are made, it's for the good of all Canadian agriculture. So it's a lot broader than maybe our needs provincially or regionally. But we deal with that in our own province, in that we're representing all producers. So there's a lot of difficult discussions that are had, but I think at the end of the day, I think everyone is important, but we have to make sure that any outcomes from any policies or impacts are discussed fully around the table before we make a decision to take to the federal government. But I think that alignment is really evident right now, in that when we go to the government as an organization, that our messaging for agriculture, whether you're even, we make sure that stakeholders that aren't even members of CFA, that we're making sure that we all have the same message when we're going to our MP, our members in the federal government, so that consistent one message comes out crystal clear, because it is really easy for the media, unfortunately, and for leaders to dismiss maybe causes if we're not aligned with the same messaging. So that's really crucial. It's really evident here in today's trademark atmosphere, for sure.
Yeah, over the years, I've seen tremendous collaboration and compromise at the CFA level. I recall one time when Minister Van Cleef asked CFA for how he should allocate the transition funding when we went to the agricultural policy framework. He had announced somewhere around $2 billion, and he had one of his officials bring it to the CFA table, saying, we've got 4 options here. Which one would you recommend? And in fact, we had the president of the UPI at the time recommend an option that deviated from the typical Fredericton formula allocation of funding, and gave the West a disproportionate amount, because the West was going through a really tough period. I think they had drought in one province and floods in another province, and so they actually compromised and gave up some of their own funding to make sure that the needy provinces would be would be kept more harmless. And that was just a great thing to see, that sort of compromise. Wayne, what was your experience with regard to the national picture vis-a-vis provincial specific issues?
Well, I think Jill's point is absolutely correct. You've got to try and get there with one voice. And I know from the government side, over the years, is oftentimes you'd have, well, especially in the Canadian Wheat Board fight, which I was involved right to the hilt. But you'd have one group coming in saying another, and another group coming in saying almost the direct opposite, and then all over the place. And that only gives government a way out. You have to understand, and I've said this many times, but usually you will find the Minister of Agriculture federally is on your side in terms of most of your issues. The Minister of Agriculture has to deal with all those other people around the table, the cabinet table, who many don't have a clue about agriculture other than there's food in the grocery store shelves. And you also have to deal with the Department of Finance, which I can tell you, because I chaired finance for 6 years, they don't have a clue when it comes to agriculture. And so the importance of one voice is critical. Now, you don't expect everybody to agree all the time, and as Bob said earlier, there has to be compromises found. But I would say to farm leadership and to farmers across Canada, they do not have to be in conflict with one another. There's variations for sure, but the farm community, one sector depends on another in the farm community. I mean, you're in dairy, Jill, so you likely had to, depend for a feed supply on some others from time to time, and so on and so forth. It all has to work together, and so we have to have the same objective at the end of the day, and try not to be in too much conflict when you're going to government.
Yeah, so Jill, do you have any ideas on how, so you've got the group at CFA, and then of course there's others that are not in CFA. I've always thought that a self-respecting minister would never listen to one commodity group on its own. Obviously, they have to look at the big picture. So what's the advantage of an organization not being inside CFA when it comes to policy recommendations to the minister? Is there a way around that? Can we make sure, or can someone make sure that everybody speaks with one voice?
I think you can see the success in those summer meetings that are occurring. This summer, we've extended and included, organizations that don't have a seat at the table. Of course, we would wholeheartedly like everyone at the table when we're to formulate those decisions, but sometimes that doesn't occur. But I think in that open format, if I could speak to how, even specifically this year, how we've even really opened it up more and have, with the exception that we don't have the ministers there in the discussions, our roundtable discussions on important and relevant things today, trade, definitely domestic and export trade. We have infrastructure, of course, and supply chain, and we also have discussions on BRM, and now we've got to hit the ground running. So now let's look at what that new partnership is going to look like, or the new strategy in a year and a half from now. So we have to have all key stakeholders involved in those discussions and open to having those, and have some really good some input come out of it, so that can be presented to the provincial ministers and our federal minister in the fall. And I think to your point, as far as the Minister of Agriculture is definitely, has our ear and a voice federally, to depend on that real strong leadership there, as well as the whole of government approach. And I think that's the one thing that we really stressed here in Manitoba, and I think that we're using that same model federally, is that to reach out to all of the ministers and to have that influence for sure at the PMO's office, so that message comes from the Prime Minister himself down, emphasizing the importance of agriculture and effect on all departments and not just the Department of Agriculture. It, economically, a driver in Canada, 100% major driver here in Manitoba that drives all of the other sectors, and definitely a decision that is made independently without agriculture's input, as to what the impacts are, then we're looked upon and have to go back and fight for changes. So good policy has to come from good, solid discussions before it's put in place. So that whole of government approach where agriculture matters, if that's something that I want to, bang my hand on the table, is something that's really close to my heart, to make sure that all of those individuals know, and even in a province where now the majority of the MLAs are maybe not from a rural setting, that education piece is really important, to make sure that they all are aware of agriculture, the importance of it, and that it does affect their constituents in the cities or where they were elected, because jobs rely on agriculture succeeding.
Yeah, and Wayne has said this, and we've discussed this before on the show. One of the things that departments hate, and I think the ministers like it, but departments don't like it if there's broad-based consensus between commodities, because that leaves them no wiggle room to insert their own idea, right? Would you agree with that, Wayne?
Yeah, absolutely. As when I was a minister, I used to say even when I was in finance too, but I used to say to them, look, don't come in here giving me the 9 reasons why it can't be done. Come in here and find a way to give me the one reason how it can be done, and that's what's critical. You have to find a path forward, and the bureaucracy, it is what it is. The past responsibility. It's got worse over the years, in which nobody wants to take responsibility for decisions anymore, and so you pass it to one, you pass it to other, and I mean, even in the last government and this one, I'm not sure of the number of people in a minister's office right now under Kearney, but some minister's office has had as high as 40 what you call exempt staff. That's people working directly for the minister. When I was a minister, there was 6, and on average now there's over 20. That's just a way for things not to get done, because number one, it's the department will as an MP, I know, the department will shuffle you. Well, you better go to the minister's staff, so you can't get an answer to the department, and you go to the minister's staff, and well, I'm not really responsible for that. I mean, it's even hard for MPs to get answer in that kind of environment. So I say for ministers, less staff is better, and challenge the department to do certain things for sure. That's kind of where I see it coming from, Bob. One other thing I wanted to mention, though, in what Jill was saying in terms of the Fed province meeting, I guess, they are critical. Those were, and I'm not sure who started there, whether it was Mazinkowski or who, but that is really good for all the ministers to come together, but to hear directly from the farm community as well. And there's one thing, Jill, I would say to keep in the back of your mind when you're talking to ministers at this one. We have no idea what Trump's going to do. And I've said this many times about Canada. We are too much the Boy Scouts of the world. We abide by the trade agreements. We follow the rules. If you look at the amount of money that the U.S. is paying out to those producers versus what we're allowed to do in terms of our threshold, and we're not doing. Ministers need to realize that this customer goes the wrong way, then they have got to up the ante to support our producers, because they can't be left out there hanging and being the Boy Scouts of the world while everybody else is not. It's just the reality of trying to deal with the Trump world.
Well, you always provide me with the perfect segue, Wayne. But before we go there, I just wanted to make another. You mentioned tactics by departments. I recall Minister Van Cleet's departmental liaison in the minister's office telling me one time that the deputy minister would drop a thick sheaf of policy documents on the minister's desk late Friday afternoon and say, we need the minister's signature on these before he goes home for the weekend. And of course, that was simply a tactic, hoping that no one was going to peruse those documents in any kind of detail, but just simply rubber stamp them. Wayne, one last question on agriculture, speaking as one voice. You, more than any other finance chair, pushed for agricultural organizations to present to the finance committee. How did you handle it there, or later on in an in-camera session? How did you handle if organizations spoke with a different voice?
Well, it's pretty near impossible too. And when it's coming up to finance, and you're talking to the ministers, and you got one voice saying one thing and one saying another. All you can do is for the finance committee itself to try and come together and find the compromise that you say to the Minister of Finance, we think this would work. And quite often, I mean, I know all you see in question period is Conservatives and Liberals fighting, but often in those in-camera sessions in committee, the characters come together and try and find what is the best solution. There's going to be a dozen that you can't find solutions on, but so if organizations are here and here, then the committee can say, well, look, we think there's a compromise here, and put that to the minister, or maybe make a recommendation on it. It's the only way you can do it.
All right, thanks for that, Wayne. Jill, so has there been any impact in Manitoba on the ground because of the trade tensions between Canada and the U.S. for agriculture?
Oh, I think it's just the uncertainty. Certainly, there has been additional costs passed on, that are passed on through supply chain. We've seen, certainly, I think hesitation in investment probably would be the first impact that we see. And we see that even nationally with even our effect on investment, say in the ethanol or distilled arenas, where everybody's kind of wait and see as to what's gonna happen. So having that stable market, and how vastly important that CUSMA agreement is, really impacts our ability to look forward and investment in stability going forward. So many of our relationships in the States are dependent and were built on that agreement with the United States. We do strongly, and I do strongly believe that we have to look at other markets. We have to look at other opportunities, whether that's through the North Port in Manitoba, allowing for that additional trade corridor, whether that's through northern Manitoba, Saskatchewan into Manitoba towards that northern port. But in order to encourage that investment, we need to have a stable trade environment, and that comes from first developing a trade strategy. What does that what does that national investment in infrastructure look like? We're so far behind, even in competition-wise, investment in something like water infrastructure across Western Canada. Where does industry go to if we want to increase, say for instance, in the potato industry or agriculture, infrastructure for irrigation. What does that look like? So often, all of the provinces are so to speak competing for those wins, so to speak. But I think we have to look at, and I think that's been emphasized with our relationship with the states, to make sure that all of the premiers are on the same page, that we're all working together, that we have strong leadership, and that I think has rose to the occasion over the last since the fall. Having that national leadership now with the Prime Minister, and going forward as far as productivity, where's Canada heading into the future? How do we position ourselves? Make sure that we're ready for investment. And all of those factors are really important, but we all have to work together rather than independently. And I see that happening. So I'm really excited for agriculture to see where that's gonna land. And really excited for Manitoba as to the huge potentials that we have going forward, and really stressing, I think if you look internationally, we really have to lean into what we have to offer as the North Americans, like as a whole unit, because the way that we farm, our interests, our regulations, for the most part, are in line. And for us to expand internationally, I think we have to really lean into that relationship rather than discarding it. But we do have to look at other opportunities outside of south of the border, for sure.
Bob, if
Well
I could
said.
just come in here for a minute there, I really think, Jill, there's an opportunity for agriculture generally, farm organizations generally, to work with other industries, given that Carney and company want to get into some really national projects.
Yep.
And there is an opportunity with a northern outlet for whether it's oil or LNG or whatever, and pipelines getting to a northern port. But in that, there should also be an opportunity for the farm community to have another agricultural or a farm commodity outlet in terms of its shipping.
Yep.
And so it's important to try and I guess try and build some relationships with some of those other industries that are putting that thrust forward, because the more the merrier, I would say.
Yep.
Here's how, oil and gas, LNG, farmers, others can benefit from this so-called energy corridor, but there's other benefits for others as well.
No, I agree
Well,
with you 100%.
sorry, Jill, are your farmers discouraged, or are they looking at options as optimistically as you are? Or are you pulling them, or are you pushing them?
I think farmers naturally are optimistic. How do you fight against weather, and yet you go out every year, right? International trade and relationship to the states. I think if I look around the table that I sit at in the morning, there's my husband and three other, owner operators of our operation. It's continuing day to day, right? I think it's to make sure as an organization that we provide the tools and information to our producers. I think that's really key. Marketing is just it's a frustration. It's nothing is following the normal, right? We went through COVID where prices went through the roof, but costs went through the roof. Now we're looking at the reverse, where our margins are even shrinking at a tremendous rate. We don't, the tensions in trade have dictated huge declines in the revenue stream on crop. So that again just adds one more layer of tense. But I think inertly, like, farmers are optimistic. Like, I can look to our beef producers that went through since BSC and then are finally seeing the turnaround in that sector. Like, And how do you encourage and put programs in place to encourage that next generation to come into farming, whether that's newcomers or that next generation? I'm fortunate that I'm part of a 4-generation family farm. I've got our children and our 2 nephews that are on the farm and working. But like, how do you encourage them to stay? And the opportunities are endless in agriculture. That starts with my whole rant on ag in the classroom and how important it is to really present what agriculture is and the opportunities that are there. But I think the roadblocks for staying in agriculture and getting into agriculture probably aren't all that different than when my father, started in agriculture, and that is, he would have been in his 80s now, where, lack of capital, access to programs. It's just times 100 now as far as dollar investment to get in. So they're just magnified that much more. But as an organization, to provide those tools, to provide the insight to government and industry and our banking system, and led by FCC, to develop programs to assist farmers to do better, to innovate, and to allow for expansion so that we can include that next generation into farming.
Well, and you're also very fortunate that you're diversified in your operation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of its own safety net there as well. Wayne, you and I talked about this yesterday, and Jill mentioned all the other impacts on agriculture. It's not just trade. There's a lot of others. And you were talking about the cattle industry. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing. You're also on the board of directors of a beef packing plant in PEI, I believe. Tell us a little bit about another issue that's had an impact on agriculture
Yeah.
and farmers by extension.
Well, yeah. Well, I do. Jill, I chair the board of Atlantic Beef Products Incorporated, which is the only federally inspected beef slaughter plant east of Montreal. So we handle a lot of the cattle from Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and on an average week we will buy 200 cattle in Quebec and sometimes in Ontario. Trucking costs are unreal, of course, but the U.S. Decision to get in a row with China has meant that China now is not allowing American beef into China. It is coming through, we know, in a market through Hong Kong, so they are still getting some of their cattle there for sure. But then that has impacted the United States, that they're now moving their cattle into other markets. Like we have a market in Japan and South Korea, and so that has pushed the price down with the Americans trying to dump their cattle in there. So there's implications, all around. Also. In terms of rendering products from our plant, because soybean prices and others have fallen as a result of some of these trade disputes. That opens up, soybeans and other products for going for what normally we would put rendering products in. So that's pushed the price of that down. So I guess the point is, there seems to be a domino effect on some of these things that are going on in the industry. Much of it caused by the United States and the uncertainty and some of the quick decisions made there that'll impact right across the food chain. And I would say, I'd say this to you guys, especially as a dairy producer. I think dairy operations have become accustomed to the high price for cull cows and for calves as a result of the low supply of beef. don't forget about, like, when that comes off, and it will, because beef operates in cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, don't give up on your on your margins on the milk, because you got to keep that system, because I think they're fortunate at the moment. There's other income, but that
Mm-hmm.
other income's not always going to be there, and so because things are relatively good right now because of cattle, don't ever loosen up on the margins that you have to have for your dairy operation, because
Yeah.
that can happen when things are going well.
100%.
So, the elephant in the room, of course, when it comes to trade and Trump's comments, is Bill C-282. Well, I still call it 282. I think now in the new parliament it's 202.
Mm.
And Jill, I'm sure you're familiar with the bill in the House of Commons that passed both the House as well as the Senate, that supply management be kept off the negotiating table in
Mm-hmm.
any future trade negotiations. What is that doing to the dynamics in Manitoba between exporters and supply management? Do you see any tension there, or are people not that much aware of what's going on in Parliament in that regard?
Oh, I think they're very well aware, but I think it's one of those, if I can call it a political football, if it is, where I think around the tables that I'm at, I stress, the importance of both markets, domestic and export markets, and the value of both, and not dwelling on divisiveness of picking winners and losers. I think both are very integral to the future of agriculture and the economy here in Canada. The I guess the comment that is made a lot by our counterpart to the States is how it's hurting his family farms in the States, having the system that we have here in Canada. But to that note, I argue it is actually the cornerstone that is actually supporting the family farm here in Canada. Its ability to continue to thrive, to reinvent, to have a system that is available for our children to continue, and if you simply look at the size of our farming operations here in Manitoba, and the integral part that it has in rural Canada, it is of utmost importance, but the export market is as well. So the phrase that I like is the do no harm clause, where we can be able to get everyone to the table. It is a signature of how strong CFA is when we have record numbers that are coming to this meeting here this summer, and that is the whole ag sector. There would be maybe some individuals that have chosen to, because the ministers aren't here, they won't be here. But I think it is a statement of how strong we are as far as we can bring all of those sectors together for that single voice going to the federal government, and really essential leading up to CUSMA in the future, as to the negotiators at that time, and from a provincial standpoint, making sure that every province has strong individuals there leading to and providing guidance to our negotiator that will be at the table when we sit down and discuss our agreement with the states and Mexico. And I even reaching out to our federally, as a nation and as CFA, having those stronger relationships even with Mexico. I think it's of the utmost importance that we work together. The United States is very dependent on that trade that allows them to do further trades. So because our industries are so integrated, if I can point to the pork and the beef industries, though it is essential that we have a real strong trade relationship that benefits us all at the end of the day. So I tend to lean towards collaboration and de-escalating that and the do no harm and working together, that we have to have we all have to work together at the end of the day.
Well, and
Bob, here
on your farm with dairy and grain, you represent the quintessential Canadian trade negotiating position. I used to say that when we farmed hogs and turkeys. In fact, I remember hearing someone speak at a meeting that represented the export industry. And after the meeting, I went to that person. I said, "You sure did not represent my export commodity on my farm very well, because the success of an export trade negotiating position is contingent on how you accommodate supply management with that position, and vice versa. The success of a supply management trade negotiating position is contingent on how well it accommodates the export industry." Wayne, you and Charlie were talking last week or 2 weeks ago about supply management's approach to combating some of the negative publicity that they're getting. And I think you made the comment that maybe they focus too much on pushing governments without and kind of losing sight of educating the public. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, I can. And the bottom line here in supply management is that Canadians need to know is supply management creates stability for those producers that are in the supply management industries, but also creates stability and fair pricing for those consumers that are buying those supply managed products. And that message has to get across, because you have professors from universities who are more protected than anybody in terms of their jobs out there criticizing supply management, saying prices are too high and, prices would be better if you had an open market system. Those folks have to be challenged, and I'm worried recently, especially with this motion in the House, that supply management organizations and their allies are not countering some of those claims that are made in the media, because you need the public on side. You got to keep the public on side. We got to build understanding in the public on what supply management really does in ensuring a safe and reasonably priced food supply within Canada. And the motion in the House and the Senate, in my view, you said political football, and that's true, has almost put a target on supply management's back, and that's regrettable that it has. But we are where we are. And so I would hope that supply management groups and their allies can do a little more in terms of getting information out there to the public through the press, CBC, the other media, on what it really is and what it really does, because you have to defend yourself and promote it.
Yeah. And to that note too, when you say it puts a spotlight or a target on the SM5, but I think it really puts a target on agriculture as a industry, and it being used to divide, and I think that's where we have to really have strong leadership, even at that at our federal level as well as around the provincial table, to ensure that that we do stand together, and despite that, and at the end of the day, right, really emphasize that information to consumers too. Like, it wasn't too many months ago when we had the avian disaster that happened in the States with the price of eggs. We have such safe, fair priced, and stable, good food, healthy food here in Canada, that I'd hate to see that dissipate or be a target if individuals don't know the right information.
Well, and
Correct.
both supply management and exporters work within this basically the same regime, right?
Yep.
TRQs and over quota tariffs and regular tariffs. In fact,
Yep.
when Canada negotiated a bilateral with Ecuador, we had a major export industry that was not interested in dropping tariffs down to zero for Ecuador, and so it works both ways. Jill, have you had
Yep.
an opportunity to meet the new minister, federal minister?
I have not yet. We will probably be meeting at the very least virtually here next week, but certainly the president of CFA and our team in Ottawa have met with Minister McDonald and have conversations with the team there. So looking forward to meeting him in my next trip to Ottawa and hoping that will be soon. But looking forward to the opportunity.
Well, you might be interested to know, and perhaps you know this already, that he replaced Wayne Easter in his riding. So if you need some advice on how to handle him, you can always give Wayne a call. I
Yeah,
don't know.
when I stepped down, he took on the on the riding, and
Okay.
he's a gentleman if there ever is one.
Oh,
Hopefully, he can be a little more aggressive than he typically is. But I'll tell you, he's certainly been out there and about. He's really been working at
yes.
getting his head around us. He understands maritime agriculture, but he's really trying to get his head around Western agriculture. He's at the Calgary Stampede, and I'll tell you this: Prime Minister Kearney should have learned some lessons from on how to flip pancakes.
I heard that was an event, yes. And yeah, he has been out to Saskatchewan and certainly, I think we really have some strong voices federally now, like even in the Senate with, Senate, with Senator
Mary
Robinson
Robinson,
and
yeah.
now Senator Lewis, as well as, of course, our friend Senator Black. And then even around even closer to the PMO's office, even having Cody Blas, close there as well. I think now, and I said that here in Manitoba, we have the opportunity right now with the leadership that we have to actually really make some progress. So that's why I say I'm eternally optimistic and cautiously optimistic, going forward. But there's huge potential here, and we have to take advantage of it, and so that we can really make some inroads.
Well, and you'll be happy to know he has agreed to come on this program once he can free up some time. So
Yeah.
so it'll be great to
No,
have a
it's great.
discussion with him. What about your work with the minority government in Ottawa? Do you know John Barlow?
Yes, we have like close contact with the caucus there as well, and then as you may well know, like with Dan Mazer here in Manitoba, and more locally, Mr. Leslie here from our area. So in close contact with our all of the MPs that are there, as well as reaching out to the now newly formed or reformed government. So I think it's just realigning and making sure that those contacts and extending those contacts beyond members and inclusive of the Senate, because that's becoming more and more important as far as voices at that level as well. And so advocating and making sure everyone is aware of the agriculture and what's happening is really becoming really evident today.
I'd add in Jill too, in your province, Larry McGuire.
Yes, Larry as well. Yeah.
Larry and I have, I actually got Larry's private members bill through the finance committee, but Larry and I differed immensely, direct opposites on Canadian Wheat Board. But on everything else, we pretty well were able to work together. So
Yeah.
he's a good guy to stay in touch with as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, no national meeting or program would do justice unless we did a weather report. So, Jill, tell us about Manitoba. How's the weather there, and is it?
It rained again this morning. Manitoba is fortunate as far as getting the crop in early this year. I think it was a little bit later in the southern because it was wetter, kind of in the southeast. But I think on an overall basis, I think the crop all went in relatively good. We do have some real dry areas, like the northwest. In the north, again, we're battling forest fires again. Thompson and Lynn Lake, like they're crucial right now as far as evacuations and need some moisture desperately. The inner lake, again, drought. Producers up in that area have been fighting either extreme drought or wet for the last 10 years, I think. I think I talked to a few producers in the area, and they can probably count on one hand the years that they had things if there was a normal, right? But I think fair to good for the majority of the province, but we do need some moisture. And in the words of my husband, a nice 2-day, 2-inch soaker probably, and then that would probably get the majority of the crops through to harvest. But there is some really good potential out there, but we do need some moisture in this. It is, they want to say with the Humidex over 40 today projected. So it's going to be a cooker. So I'm going to be staying in where it's air conditioned, I hope. But I do have some outside work, and my sour cherries are ready to get picked, and I've been putting it off because it's so bloody hot out there. But it's not a day to be out, and I know the last few days working outside has been really treacherous for guys, like for heat. And most of our guys we sent home by 3 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday afternoon just because of the heat. But we do need some. The forecast looks good, but for rain, but we don't need any of those. And I know you probably we don't need a 10-minute torrential rain of 1 inch, but over a couple days would be great.
I'll be thankful you're not a chicken or turkey producer. Have the wildfires impacted on any of your farmers?
We did have in the eastern, like east of Winnipeg, like in the Lac du Bonnet area, they had significant issues there. But it would be primarily in the Crown land, like where we've got, some cattle producers. But in those areas too, very dry. So they're getting some stress as far as low dugouts and pasture levels are low. In the inner lake, pastures are burning off. And I know we did, even our first cut of just of native hay, we're looking at probably about half a crop this year. So hoping that most producers took advantage of the excess hay last year and have stocks going into this year. But it's probably something that, we're certainly keeping an eye on. And if you talk about providing information and being proactive with government, I think a lot of this is ongoing discussions so that the government knows that is something to watch for rather than, and being proactive to have, programs in place if we have to, when it happens. So on the radar, definitely, as far as feed quality and supply going into the fall.
What have you got in PEI, Wayne?
We can't complain. We've had some of those hot days that you're experiencing today, I can tell you, because we had a day here that would have been about 38 in the Humidex a couple of days, but we're getting heavy dews at night, which is actually helping. Mm-hmm. We do need around here. We need moisture every week, and we did get a rain a little while ago, but it's spotty. It's hard to believe. The island, as small as it is, one mm-hmm. area will get rain and another will not. But crops are growing well, so we're okay for the moment. But it's never over until it's over.
No, that's right. Never over until it's in the bin.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for being back, Wayne. Thank you so much, Jill, for joining us. All the best to your family. All the best to your farm. All the best to being president of KAP, and all the best to being VP at CFA. You've got your work cut out for you, but I can tell you're enjoying it, and you have the positive spirit that you need to make it work. So thanks for being on as a guest of the show.
Thank you for having me.
Don't forget to pick those choke cherries.
I gotta get those cherries
picked. Not.
So, I know. That and Saskatoons. Okay, take care.
Take care, bye.